Hey guys, it's Nick. Um, this video might be a little bit longer, but I've decided to take a step away from the game. I'll still play here and there, but I'm not going to play like I have in the past, and I will also not really be making videos anymore. So this is kind of my farewell to Forge of Empires, but I want to give you guys, I kind of want to pass the torch. Everyone is good at different parts of the game, but the niche that I fell into was city design, and I've gotten a lot of compliments and a lot of positive feedback, not just from my server, but from YouTube as a whole. People on other servers that liked the my approach to city design. So I kind of want to pass that torch on to you guys. I'm gonna share a couple tips and tricks that I haven't really covered in a whole lot of detail in my videos in the past, but I want to share those things with you guys so that you can continue uh, being awesome at the game as I step away from it. So, um, city design is the topic for today, but before we jump directly into that, let's talk about road efficiency is obviously one metric. We want to be efficient with our roads. That's usually the heart of the videos that I've posted. But let's take a step back from that and think about what it actually means to build a city, okay? And that's going to be a different set of criteria for every individual player. My moniker in the game is FP Machine, so Forge Points is pretty high on the list of priorities for me. To be honest, Fragments is a higher priority for me, but the end result is kind of the same. I'm collecting building fragments or consumable fragments for the purpose of generating Forge Points. So those kind of go hand in hand. For some people, though, the priority is attack, and I'm going to give you some examples of that, where that would come into play with city design. That is not true of my city, right? Because my main priority is not attack, so those things are not present in my city. For some people, the criteria is honestly just to make it look pretty, and it's funny. I have a pretty healthy collection of cherry parts, and I couldn't store as many as I had at one point, so I've actually deleted a lot of it. But still, I have a pretty healthy collection of cherry kits just because I always thought they were cool. And it does cross my mind sometimes if I could just scrape the city and fill it with cherry sets, make it pretty, and then retire. So everyone has a different set of criteria in the game. Looking at attack real quick, here's a good example. Take a four pieces of Neo King or Queen and compare that to a Neo Colossus. You can see that I don't have Neo Colossus planted. I have one that's the platinum version, but I don't have any of the normal Colossus planted. And I obviously have plenty of hardware to plant more of those. I just don't have them planted. The attack stats are better, but the goods generated by Neo Colossus go to the guild, where, like Neo King and Queen, a portion of those goods go to the individual player, and I'm kind of selfish that way. Forge points, a little better forge point production. The big advantage with Neo King and Queen is that they can be affected by Finish All Special. So, for the purpose of double dipping a city, the Neo Kings and Queens a little more bang for the buck at the expense of attack ability, right? Same is true for Jesters. 15 over 22, blue is not terrible, but compared to a lot of the hardware that's available nowadays, the Jester stages really aren't that desirable. However, the finished special fragments are a big part of my game strategy. So think about your priorities when we're talking about how do I organize my city. Well, what are your priorities? If your priorities are attack and you have something similar to what I have currently, your priority would actually be to delete a lot of your road hardware and fill in roadless stuff with better attack stats. So another good example of that, I obviously have a pretty healthy surplus of population, and a lot of that is coming from the Yukimoto towers, giving almost 40,000 population. Same footprint as a Neo Colossus, not including the road connection, obviously, but same footprint as a Neo Colossus. The difference is 109 forge points, though, versus the 31 off the Neo Colossus. And the Neo Colossus has much better attack stats all around, but again, that's not my priority. So let's get to the topic. Adjusting your city as new hardware comes out and trying to adapt to new buildings. Decide if you want the new building, if you don't want the new building, how many of the new building you want, and where it's going to go. So as we start tackling that problem, a couple things to think about. Remember, pick your priorities, right? So if my priority is forge points, I really like the attack on these Magnum Opus, really awesome attack stats. And I do try to keep somewhat of a balance in my city. But if I'm going for pure forge points, Magnum Opus is probably not going to make the cut, right? Same thing with like the Escutcheon Estates. The forge point production is pretty minimal on it. I keep it for the fragments, obviously, the finished special fragments. But in terms of forge points, I think it's only like 25 forge points, which I can get in half the real estate from something like a Neo Aviary. Or double that number with a group of Neo Kings and Queens. You know what I mean? So as we're thinking about that priority, okay, I'm willing to get rid of some Magnum Opus in favor of Yuki towers for the forge point production. Hypothetically, let's say that's the decision that I've come up with for my city. Here's some practical advice on how to set that up. And I'm going to get into edit mode real quick, just so we can kind of mess around with that. I strongly recommend keeping all of your small, or at least a pretty healthy group of small building hardware together. Like I see a lot of cities where it's kind of chaotic, everything's spread around, so you have, there's some 4x4 road lists, there's some 2x2 behind it, whatever. And that's kind of inevitable to some extent. And a lot of the hardware placement that I have isn't random, which shouldn't be a surprise to you guys since I am a city design kind of guy. So this entire top group is QI related, and I have a pattern for keeping those ascended. The stack of stuff behind it is actually kind of temporary because I am eventually going to drop a bunch of those ascended orbs, like probably 20 of them ascended at the same time, and just have some ridiculous collections for a month. So there's some temporary ideas in there. This blueberry thing is also temporary for some more Ember things from this most recent event, FSP kits again on that. So there is some randomness, right? But in the way that I've designed my city, a lot of those little locations are actually pretty intentional. Pair of Hauler and Harvest Hub that will be replaced by more Magnum Opus just for the attack ability. Same thing down here for the kiosks as those take over. So some of that placement is intentional. It looks random, but some of that placement is actually intentional. I also recommend having at least a 2x2 block of 1x1 material, but ideally like a 3x3 block of 1x1 material. And the reason why that's helpful when you're trying to redesign your city, let's go with the first example and say that I've decided to I'm going to get rid of some Magnum Opus in favor of Yukis. Let's go with that example, okay? I need to move the hardware behind this shrine. I need to move that hardware out of the way somewhere in order to extend this road, right? Hypothetically, like, let's say my jesters I don't want to get rid of, or The space that the jesters are consuming is already Yuki towers, and I want to add even more Yuki towers. Okay, so the hardware behind that shrine has to go somewhere, and here's where it comes in handy to have that 1x1 stuff. So 2 of these 3x3s is going to take up 18 squares, right? Which is roughly 4 of these with a little bit left over. The difference, though, is that the dimensions aren't really compatible, right? So it's going to be really hard to pack these 3x3s into a pocket of 2x2 without a bunch of wasted space. So as you are envisioning those changes, okay, I'm gonna compress this road, or I'm gonna extend it. This is the hardware that I want, or I want hardware up here. Look for small groups of hardware that you can easily shuffle by moving a 3x3 down here, but then lining it with small filler below it, so that you don't end up with 6 wasted squares, where it's like, yeah, 6 wasted squares is effectively a Neo King, but it's not going to fit in that location. So I had to store one piece of hardware more than I really needed, and now I've got this awkward gap in my city that I don't really have anything to fill it with. Versus, okay, I have 6 empty squares. I could actually store one less Neo King, but I just need a location for that Neo King, right? Which would be here, and repurpose the 1x1 from that location. Does that make sense? That's my biggest piece of advice to you guys. And if you have more questions about that idea or whatever, feel free to drop me a comment. I'll still be around. I'm just taking a step back from the frequency that I play. So hope this is helpful to you guys in terms of kind of visualizing, and it's true for anything, right? So let's say I want to get rid of a 7x4 in favor of another eco. Well, 7x4 is 28 plus 8 squares from the Neo King and the Neo Queen, gives me the 36 squares that I need for an eco. And obviously an eco is not going to fit in this location, right? But that's why it's beneficial to have, like, the hardware in this thing right here now is the same number of squares as an eco, right? I just have to make room for that somewhere. Which would be pretty easy to do, honestly. You guys get the idea. Using 1x1s and stuff to change the shape that you're working with. This is gonna be in the way here, but if I could separate this into a block of 6 1x1s like that, there's your eco location. Does that make sense? So hopefully that's helpful for you guys in terms of visualizing how to make those changes quickly with an established city. If you're trying to build a city layout from scratch and you already have the hardware that you want, look at some of my other videos on the city design. That goes a little more in depth about how to start from scratch, and like, if you haven't reorganized your city in 10 years and you need to do some spring cleaning, I have some other videos geared towards that topic. But in terms of making changes quickly and adjusting to new hardware as it comes out, use the S pattern that I explained in my other videos. I do recommend the S pattern because this bottom row is flexible left to right. So if the new hardware that I want is road based, I can easily extend this, store some roadless stuff, or vice versa if the new trinket is roadless, and compress that row back into the city. So I do recommend the S pattern, where most of the hardware that I have organized in the top of my city is what I consider mostly permanent, you know, and all the changes that I'm making happen on this bottom row. And the part that's also part of the reason why I have small hardware grouped below this bottom row, where like my bigger roadless hardware is grouped here at the top, but it doesn't move, you know. So I think that's it for this, but farewell, guys. I would say that I'll talk to you later, but I probably won't. But God bless and take care.